One of the most difficult questions and problems that people have whenever they get charged with a DUI is what's going to happen to my driver's license, and kind of what are the steps that I need to take to make sure that my driver's license stays safe. Most of us need it to function just in our daily lives. And that is a very real problem that anyone who's been charged with a DUI needs to be concerned with. That problem really is isolated to one category cases. If you refuse to submit to the blood, breath, or urine test that's requested after you're placed under arrest, then you have refused it pursuant to implied consent. That means that they can try to suspend your license with no limited permit whatsoever for up to 12 months following your arrest. That's a big problem. That's something that we really need to worry about. But now we have two different options. A couple of years ago, our law changed so that you have the ability to install an ignition interlock and bypass that suspension. That ignition interlock allows you to get a permit. That's a limited permit that allows you to drive to and from work, school, medical emergency sort of stuff. But you have to have the ignition interlock. And even if your case is reduced or dismissed, if you plead to reckless driving, you're still going to have that ignition interlock device for at least 12 months. That's really important. So making the decision whether or not you're going to file an appeal from the suspension or whether or not you're going to go the separate route of going the ignition interlock route is really important. And as it turns out, right now during the coronavirus shutdown, we're seeing a lot of different disparities amongst jurisdiction as to whether or not officers are appearing for the administrative license suspension hearings. If you're charged with a DUI, you refuse to submit to the test, make sure that your lawyer understands, one, those two possible avenues of action, that you can either file the appeal or get an ignition interlock permit if you install the ignition interlock on your car. But two, you need to know whether or not the officers are regularly appearing for these hearings. And I'll tell you, obviously we can generalize about Georgia State Patrol. They almost always are there. Doesn't matter coronavirus or not. There are other jurisdictions though with local law enforcement officers, your sheriff's deputies, your police department officers, where it is very much a case-by-case basis as to whether or not those officers show up. For example, a DUI task force officer in Gwinnett is probably going to be there. Whereas, in smaller jurisdictions, I never see local law enforcement officers there. So you really need to know it is a local specialized knowledge that can be very important to the outcome and basically the trouble and expense that you have to go through in defending the case. So be aware of those two options. If you want to talk about them further, feel free to drop me a line below. Hope you guys are doing well and have a great weekend.